What happened at Walsh Street was not an attack on the police department, it was an attack on the community.
This was their gutless way of seeking revenge against two young, innocent patrol officers doing their job.
It was sort of unprecedented, going back to Ned Kelly days, this sort of thing, that two police being cut down in the street.
It was the callousness of the act, I think, affected the entire organisation and the community.
2 members down, urgent.
It was an attack on law and order that shocked the nation. The investigation would uncover an underworld dynasty that had ruled Melbourne streets with fear. 4 men would eventually be charged with the murders, but what happened at their trial left police and the entire country in a state of disbelief.
There's the law and there are the rules. And the ambush and murder of those 2 young policemen was certainly against the law, but it broke the rules.
For Sergeant Ron Beaton, this was a night like any other. He had no idea what lay ahead.
Everything was pretty casual. Most people trying hard to stay awake.
A resident of Walsh Street, South Yarra, was about to cycle to work at the local newsagent when a car in the middle of the street caught his eye. He reported the car to police.
I just got this suspect vehicle.
BKC to any unit near Walsh Street, South Yarra. BKC to any unit near Walsh Street, South Yarra.
When I first called for a car, for a unit, there was no one available, and 3 and 311 were the only ones, and Walsh Street wasn't the area.
3 and 311. 3 and 311, if you can slip down to Walsh Street in South Yarra.
So they shouldn't have been doing the job, but they went and did it.
There's a white Holden sedan, not knowing what the rego is. Got the lights on and the smashed windows in the middle of the road. Yeah, French 11, receive that 26483.
Manning the radio was Damien Eyre, a 20-year-old constable who'd been in the job less than a year. His father and brother were policemen, and being a cop was his lifelong ambition.
That's what he always wanted to do, and I was quite ecstatic to think that he followed along in his brothers and my footsteps, and of course we were very proud to see him graduate from the police academy.
Driving the divvy van was Stephen Tynan. At 22, he was the senior of the pair.
When he joined the police force, I was just happy that he was happy in what he was doing, because I believe in what your children want to do is the main thing, and he was happy.
Exactly what happened at Walsh Street, only the killers know. What the evidence shows is that at 4:47 a.m, the 2 young constables walked into an ambush.
I thought a truck or a semi-trailer, something very large, had hit the side of the house.
We heard gunshots. There were 2 lots.
Then I heard a voice saying, "Stop, stop, no," and then more shots.
Then we heard moaning and shouting, just briefly, and then a lot of running footsteps.
So I sort of got out of bed and looked outside the window, and I could see, I think it was a white Commodore and a police divvy van behind.
Okay, set up Fran 311. Okay, set up Fran 311. Any unit clear near Walsh Street, South Yarra.
I kept calling them and they didn't come up, but I was obviously worried because there were reports of shots being fired.
South Melbourne 150. South Melbourne 150. I sent Fran 311 down to Walsh Street. Since then I've had about 3 or 4 cards come down saying that they've heard shots fired in that street, and I can't get Fran 311 at this stage.
I didn't know whether they'd shot somebody or somebody had shot them, but whatever it be, I'd have to get somebody down there.
2 members members down, urgent. Urgent. Roger, need ambulance? Roger. Yes, ambulance, please. 2 members down.
At that point, I had to get an ambulance there straight away, get the units going around and block off any escape areas if possible. In a D24, it was just bedlam.
As a nurse, I could not just leave somebody moaning in pain, but I was also very scared about whether I should actually do anything. There was flashing lights, there was lights on the car had lights on. It was just very surreal.
South Melbourne 250 in an ambulance. We've got 2 members down, gunshot wounds. Outside 222 Walsh Street, 222 Walsh Street.
There was blood everywhere. Damien, I examined first, had wounds to the head, and he was slumped forward face onto the ground, and blood was running down the gutter. And I just thought there's nothing I could do. Then I went to Stephen Tynan, and there was a huge wound in his scalp towards the back, and I tried to find a pulse on his extended neck, and I thought I could find a faint pulse. And his breathing, he was still breathing, it was rasping in his throat.
All hell broke loose. Police arrived on our doorstep, came inside, talked to us. They were looking for a weapon. It was a very dramatic day.
Yeah, Roger, if you can come over Punt Road, Walsh Street area. We've got 2 police down.
You've got a helicopter overhead, you've got police and other sirens in the background, you've got footsteps running around, you've got a person's breathing sounds that's abnormal lying in the gutter as their blood sort of running down the street away from you and around you. Stephen had been dragged out of the car and was lying in the gutter, and there was a nurse and another policeman that was standing above him, and look, he was still breathing, and he had a massive headshot with a gunshot that taken most of his head out, and there was a massive blood loss at the scene. It was really quite horrific, and you know, to go just even reliving all of, you know, the trauma.
Yeah, at this stage we don't know. 2 members have been shot in Walsh Street, South Yarra. Take care.
It was Stephen who went in the car, in the ambulance, and I held the oxygen on him under the instructions of the paramedics while we went to the Alfred, but he was declared dead on arrival.
And a description of what we're looking for? Unfortunately negative at this stage. We've got no description at all. So it's you've got to be wary of everybody.
The 2 young constables were raced to hospital, but they were dead on arrival. Both had been shot in the head with a shotgun, and Damien Eyre was also shot twice with another weapon, probably his own service revolver, which is still missing.
I heard a car and a knock on the door, and I knew that Damien was on night shift, and I immediately had this feeling that there was something wrong.
So I looked out the window and saw 2 police standing at the front. Well, you know there's something going on.
When I opened the door and seen the look on their faces, I definitely knew there was something wrong. And they informed me that there'd been a shooting, and that Stephen Tynan was dead, and Damien was still alive. Was taken to the Alfred Hospital, but actually before they left the driveway, they've got a radio message to say that he passed away.
I knew exactly, pretty much straight off, what it must have happened. So that was pretty horrific.
Definitely a shock. It's I suppose it's like anyone that gets a death message, you know, which I've delivered myself to different people. They don't want to you don't want to believe it. You don't think it's really you or it's really your family. You don't want to believe it.
The family shock at the cold-blooded killings was felt across the country. There was anger, confusion, and the overwhelming need to find those responsible.
It was quite clear that it was a particular type of person that would be capable of committing that atrocious act of murdering the 2 members. We would take a very cruel and callous and cowardly person to do it.
The funerals of Stephen Tynan and Damien Eyre were an outpouring of public and private grief and despair. Everyone wanted answers. The investigation would become the biggest the state had ever seen.
There is no stone to be left unturned until the people responsible for these events face the full consequences of the law.
It soon became clear that this was no random attack. The apparently senseless killings had roots in a long-fought battle between police and a notorious gang of hardened criminals, a gang ruled by a ruthless underworld family and a secret pact that would soon see even more blood spilt on the streets of Melbourne. The ambush and murder of two young policemen in a Melbourne street devastated two families and left the community traumatised.
The deaths on the 12th of October this year of Constable Stephen Tynan and Damien Eyre at this spot touched not only the Victoria Police Force, not only the members of their families, but the whole of the community of Victoria.
The reaction from the force was one of horror, and the shock within the community was palpable.
Police soon suspected these vicious murders had their roots in a long-fought and bloody criminal battle.
Hands down on the floor. Where is it? Where is it?
In the late 1980s, Melbourne's suburbs were being terrorised by a gang of cold, calculating and brutal armed robbers.
They were wild times. They were wild because you were dealing with some of the most vicious people who had the propensity to take innocent lives for no reason other than to satisfy their own pockets. And in fact, the armed robbery squad had a phone that was always referred to as the red phone, which was a direct contact from the banking institution straight to the armed robbery squad, invariably for Friday afternoon from 4:30 onwards. It was more common than not to get a call.
One group, known as the Flemington Gang, was well known to police for its reign of terror.
They were a very violent group. They didn't differentiate between male, females or kids. They didn't care when they went into the bank who they terrorised, and they did physically terrorise numerous people by putting shotguns and other weapons up to the noses and very close to the face of people, and they were terrifying.
Police believe they knew who the crooks were, but they were yet to catch them in the act.
The core group were Victor Pearce, Graham Jensen, Jed Horton and Peter McAvoy. That frightening episode that they were involved in, and some, to this day would relive exactly what happened on those occasions. Peter McAvoy was the epitome of a coward. He would attack females. He'd be the bloke that would attack a young girl rather than ever affront anyone else. Jed Horton is a dangerous, cold, calculating criminal. Jed Horton scared a lot of people. Graham Jensen, he was a likeable person within his own group, but an active, dangerous, violent criminal. Victor Pearce was a dangerous, cold, calculating career criminal, murderer, and probably best described as the planner. He organised and managed what went on.
Pearce, the ringleader, came from a rich criminal pedigree. His mother was former prostitute and brothel owner Kath Pettingill, a matriarch of the underworld.
Kath unfortunately survived a shooting in her earlier days, and then she has then bred all these mongrels, I suppose is the best way of describing them. That's Dennis Allen, Peter Allen, Victor Pearce, the Pettingills. It's just a family that we hope we don't ever have replicated.
Victor Pearce's older half-brother, Dennis Allen, was one of the most feared members of the Melbourne underworld. A drug dealer and gun runner, police believe he was responsible for at least 11 murders, often with other family members watching on. He died of heart failure in 1987.
Well, he died like a drug trafficker should, slowly and in a lot of pain. He was a murderer and a drug trafficker. I suppose that speaks for itself.
Closely associated with the gang were two more members of Victor Pearce's family, his younger half-brother Trevor Pettingill and his nephew Jason Ryan. Jason's mate Anthony Farrell would soon be linked with the others. On their home turf in inner-city Richmond, the group lived by their own code, one of violence and thuggery.
Look, our career criminals are people that live a different lifestyle to the ordinary citizen. They are people who have no respect for the law. They have no respect for community values or interests.
A year before the Walsh Street killings, Victor's gang was becoming more brazen and violent. Part-time member Frank Velastro was taking the violence to a frightening new level. Police launched a raid on his home, knowing he'd be armed and dangerous.
As coppers, you had to be, in some cases, as tough as what they were.
Velastro was shot dead by Senior Constable Michael Leslie.
When Velastro was shot dead, Pearce and his gang believed police were out to kill them all one by one, and rumours started of a payback deal.
Information had surfaced during that time that as a result of Velastro killing, a pact had been formed between a number of the crooks involving Pearce, involving Jensen and the like, that the next criminal to be shot by the police, they would take out two police officers.
There was certainly this belief amongst the criminals that they were being taken out, or that the motive of the police was to kill them, and they certainly came up with this pact that was going to be 2 for 1.
The bandits' raid was well timed.
Despite the fear police were gunning for them, it was business as usual for Melbourne's criminal underworld. When a security guard, Dominic Hefty, was killed in a bungled robbery, Graham Jensen and Victor Pearce became suspects and were placed under surveillance. On October 11, 1988, the day before the Walsh Street shootings, police decided to intercept Jensen.
The man was surprised by members of the armed robbery squad as he walked out of the Narre produce store this afternoon.
The objective was to stop Jensen getting to his car, but things didn't go to plan.
As I drove into the car park, this blue Commodore was reversing at what appeared to be 40 mile an hour. So my object was to cut him off. I turned the police vehicle hard to the left, but I'd missed him. Car broadslide, it was a gravel surface. He did a U-turn. The boys had guns out, there was something going on here. By the time I'd done a U-turn, he was out and shots were fired.
The officers immediately fired several shots, hitting the car's windscreen. The gunman drove off, but a few seconds later, his car crashed into a pole and came to a stop on the curb.
The allegation was that he threatened one or two of the fellas with the firearm, and the fellas retaliated.
It was certainly a poorly planned, poorly executed attempt at effecting an arrest.
Allegations that police planted a gun in Graham Jensen's car to justify their actions were never proved. What police were soon to discover was that Graham Jensen's gang would react swiftly and violently to his death. The 2 for 1 pact was about to be put into play.
The officers immediately fired several shots. He was found slumped dead in the driver's seat.
The police shooting of suspected armed robber Graham Jensen had ramifications that would shock the Australian community. 12 hours later, 2 young policemen were ambushed and killed in Walsh Street, South Yarra, in what police would soon decide was a revenge attack.
It became obvious very quickly that this had been an execution-style killing. There'd been a number of incidents involving the police leading up to this stage, including the shooting of a crim named Jensen the day before, and the investigators fairly early on in the piece were fairly confident that there was probably a connection between those two incidents.
Investigators turned their attention to Jensen's fellow armed robbery gang, but they needed information, and the place it was going to come from was the criminal world. Within hours of the killings, police began a series of raids on known criminals that continued on and off for months. Culminating in an unprecedented 100 raids in one day.
They were terrorised, they felt threatened, they felt intimidated, and they're all the good qualities that we wanted them to feel. It was a huge operation, but a very successful operation, and it heralded a new era. We want information, and we're not just asking for it, we expect it. The police were not going to tolerate what had happened, and we were going to find out who it was that was responsible for it.
The underworld was shaken, none more than the prime targets. Victor Pearce was in hiding, supposedly in fear of his life. His solicitor arranged an interview with police. The result wasn't what he expected.
Complex this morning. After questioning, he was charged late this afternoon over the $33,000 armour guard payroll robbery at Brunswick in July.
But having the armed robbery squad throw Pearce in jail was not what those working on the Walsh Street killings wanted.
For him to be taken away the next day in charge with a murder that the armed robbery squad really had no evidence to support was disappointing. Best